what comes to my mind is that you know this example that you said of the entrepreneur that go to the school, for example, and he tells to children, "Oh, money doesn't matter." I would perceive that as him being full of shit with regards to his position in the hierarchy. Because if you were actually on that level, then you could also understand the lower aspects. See what I mean? So you could also understand the situations in which money is the important aspect. Because there are practical situations in which money is the thing that matters right there.
I think you're right. Yeah, but I used it just as an example
No,
of
yeah,
the
I know. But what I
principle.
wanted to say is that it's like,
But if you're more in a higher realm, your focus will tend to be on that principle primarily, and
right,
you will have sometimes some difficulty translating it, or that's not your basic. You
right.
know,
But you can also deal in the lower realms in the sense that,
yeah,
and
you
that's
can
also,
do it. Yeah,
yeah, and that's also like, in the story of Jesus Christ. That's also why he's most of these sages. I mean, sometimes they're like hobos and stuff like that. Sometimes they are just in the world. They're in the lower realms sometimes, even though they're in the highest point of the hierarchy of the real hierarchy. Um, and that's the thing that the how to call this. I'm going to use the word connection, even though I don't like it that much. But the connection with the highest goes through the whole thing. So in a way, it is this like this. I think it came from Buddhism. This aphorism that says, like, at the beginning, everything is just what it is. So the mountain is a mountain, and the river is a river. Then I grew, and I saw that everything was something else than it seemed. So the mountain was more than a mountain, and the river was something else. And then I came to wisdom or something like that. I don't remember exactly the words, but then again, the river was just the river, and the mountain was just a mountain. And I think there's something like that.
yes,
It's like the highest point is connected to the lowest, always. Now
yeah,
there is the disingenuous way of taking this, which is what, for example, a lot of on the modern left and stuff like that, you can see that a lot, which is like, oh, poor people are good or so, whatever, right? Because they use this actual pattern of life and they distort it. But nonetheless, it
yeah.
is
But
real.
this pattern, like how you are speaking to me right now, there's also people speaking in a different context about the same thing, but in a lower way. There could be school children or university students talking about, I don't know, math or social life, some subject, and they would have the exact same epiphany of that it's all unity and that the higher is lower, it's connected as above so below. You can see that also in an isolated subject, and then you start seeing it about life. And
Yeah,
I think I would guess, or at least for me, if the way you are speaking about it, but it seems that you understand it about life, but still you don't see all of life like those students also don't see outside of their area. They have found the real truth that is the absolute truth in a way, but they can only yet see it in still a limited the perception.
yeah, I don't know. Could
So
be.
that's how I perceive mostly what you're saying, and I don't know why I believe this. I just also base it on on a sense or intuition that, but it's also it is logical that you can see it in the lower realms. You can see that people have their understanding of spiritual concept. They have implicit understanding of a
Yes.
lot
Well, I mean,
in their subject, but then it turns out, oh wait, this subject or this part of my life, there's more to life. And then you come into a new thing, and then suddenly you don't understand those universal concepts anymore, because it became all different and more difficult, and you have
oh,
to relearn it.
interesting.
And then you go to then another layer of illusion falls away, and then you have to sort of
Interesting.
relearn it.
If I understand what you're saying, that I disagree with it. Because then, if you didn't see the pattern in the specifics, then how could you not see it? Because in a practical way, I see what you mean, in the sense that I can be like an amazing pianist, but maybe now I have to whatever chop wood, and then I can suck at it because I don't have those specific skills. But if I saw the patterns of life through my skill, then why? If you actually saw them, then how could you be blind to them on a different context, apart from just practical stuff?
Well, it happens all the time, right?
But then you didn't actually see it if it just happens. Again, it's the same thing. It's like, just to give you an example of this, one of the most common misconceptions and errors that I see in the modern world comes with the word love, in which people somehow think that they can just choose to or do stuff and they love. That is like, oh, now I'm gonna love you, and then I do some stuff, and then now I love you, and maybe I'm the idiot. I don't know, because I just cannot understand that. Because for me, it's like, I don't know. For me, it's like you're either a loving person or you aren't. And then if you're a loving person, then you will love people. And if you aren't, then you will not love them. And if you do whatever the fuck you do, doesn't really matter to me. Like you
But
can,
there is degrees of being a loving person.
yeah, no, but
In-
without entering the topic of love, because I'm using that as a parallel of what we were saying before. That is like, if you see something, then you saw that thing. You don't just become blind to it. You
no,
know what I mean? Like,
but yes, but you saw a simpler version of that thing. You saw the real thing,
right,
but like just a low resolution version. If you compare it to a picture, you saw the picture, you saw the man standing there, but you saw the real thing. You caught some
right.
of its essence. You really understood that, but after a while, you say, "Oh, if I put on the glasses, I can see the picture in higher resolution. There's more to it than I thought. It's the same thing, but oh wait, I thought I understood. Life is a series of understanding a thing and then working with it, and then you go to a more difficult, or you get challenged, and it turns out you didn't understand it so completely. You did understand it, but not as fully. You thought you had everything, and then you get notified by life, it's not everything yet, but it's the same thing. You did understand that thing, but in a simpler way. Yeah, I can see this a lot with also with things and people that I perceive to be like below my understanding. I can see that they do the same things, and I can see that they have the same epiphanies, but just in a simpler way. You can also see this with artists or scientists. Maybe you can see that the way that a child discovers is a little creative in math, or in painting or whatever. The way that he develops his skills and has epiphanies and is exactly the same way as Einstein does it. But Einstein does it at a way higher level. He takes way more of life into account while he's doing that. But they're doing the same thing. They're doing
Yeah,
exactly the same thing. But
yeah,
it's
I agree
just so
100% with that.
so it's not, yeah, so I see it like that. It's not, if you understand the principle, you probably understand it a little bit. and and that's nice, and you will reach some maximum level probably for the time being, and you will be able to enjoy it and use your when I say skills, I also mean spiritual skills, not just worldly skills. You can use your skills, you can use your awareness, you can use your understanding for a while, and you see the results of it, and then life changes, and you discover, oh wait, there's more,
All right, but
and then
then
it happens all
okay,
again.
but that's where I'm a bit confused because you do seem to be reducing spirituality to the skillful, not completely. I'm not saying that you're doing that in general in life, but at least in the words here, or at least that's how I'm
Yeah,
understanding your words.
I do
Be-
use those words, yeah, but
yeah, no,
I
but
don't know
like
how to use other words.
because what I'm confused about is like if you actually understood the principle, right? Which I do think that you describe it very well with the example of a child and Einstein. And even though there is a worldly difference between them, which is it has to be
No,
respected,
I don't
like it's
think it's
there.
just worldly, that difference.
No, that's not what I say. I say there is a worldly difference that has to be respected, but yeah, but the principle itself is pretty much the same in essence. Even though I do think that probably any difference that you could find in it would be worldly, right? But the principle is the same. Don't you think so?
No. Yeah, the maybe the child is not a good example, because it could be that the child is more advanced than Einstein, and then the age
Yeah,
doesn't
but
matter, and the
assuming that
child
he's
is,
not, assuming that he's not,
assuming that he's not, or he's just a guy, he's just a normal scientist,
yeah,
normal human versus
dummy,
Einstein. The the principle is the same in their scientific discovery,
right?
um, but still, it is it is also lower resolution,
Yeah,
simpler,
in
simpler.
worldly, in the worldly,
No,
it is simpler.
not just in worldly,
Why not?
not just in worldly.
Why
Uh,
not?
yeah. Yeah, the only examples I can give are worldly. So if I
Yeah,
give an
exactly. That's what I
example,
mean.
it's like this,
Yeah,
then you will also say, yeah, but that's also, yeah, but there are no other examples. You know,
right,
you can't explain. I can't explain what I mean without worldly examples.
right. But don't you think that means
You
that
know.
the essence precisely is the same? That you cannot that you can see the differences in the world and they have to be respected. They're there. They're important. But that the essence is the same. Like the essence of a child learning whatever to play with a ball. If it you know
Yeah,
the
the essence is the same, but it's also a more primitive version of it, and not just in the worldly way, also of that energy of love. So and that's why I think that this ties into why I think that you're not, I care about the quantity of love and evil, and I think that love and hate dwell in the same heart, because there is like real love, but like the more primitive, not the full version, but it is the real thing, but not the full version. It's yeah, just a weaker signal or lower resolution signal, but it's that signal. It's the right signal. This is the beginning for a human in love, and he can. So I'll put a number. 100% love is when you've really understood the principle. But you will have 2-3% love where you understand the principle, the same principle, but in a simpler way and not fully. So you would probably say, so you don't really understand the principle. Yeah, that's true, but it's the same principle nonetheless. Like, like a child doing math things, and he thinks he understands it, and he's doing it right. But if you go on, like 1 plus 1 is 2, there's a proof for that, right? There's a mathematical proof for that. But you don't do that in high school at all. But you still use it, and you understand the principle, but there's also proof that, and you will discover that later. So it is the same thing that you're doing, but it's weaker, it's less energy, but it is the real thing. So that's at some level, like 2% level, and then you learn it at the 2% level of love, and you think you understand it. Then life happens, and then um, you will get caught up in nothingness again, or maybe even a little evil, but not for that 2%. That 2% is now love of you. You have that 2% is love. But yeah, you go on, and then you understand that, and life happens. And then it turns out life was bigger than that 2% that you saw. And that 2%, you mastered it in the right way with all the right principles or all the right things, but it's just like a weaker version, but it's the same essence, but it's weaker. It's
Right, but don't
yeah.
you think? Because I'm trying to understand then what's the difference. Because is there another difference that is not worldly? Because the way I see it is like you have Shakespeare, for example, which is like the principle that was guiding him, whatever, was very manifest. Like he speaks extremely beautifully, and it is profound, and it's also like he has the whole thing is there, right? But then you have a person in somewhere in the world that is lower than average IQ, cannot speak on that level of beauty. However, it is also courageous and centered in the truth in such a way that when they speak, is poetic in its essence. It doesn't sound as beautiful as Shakespeare. It doesn't have
Yeah, but
a
he can
specific
be the same
vocabulary.
level as
So,
Shakespeare, of course,
so my dear,
despite his
no, but yeah,
worldly
exactly. But my question to you
differences.
would be then, where do you see the difference in the essence? Because it is only in the worldly stuff, right?
No, because that guy who can't write as beautifully, he can still do exactly the same thing at exactly the same level as Shakespeare, if there's only worldly difference. But
Right.
there is a it's possible that some person that's like Shakespeare, or that you also express the rudiments of wisdom and love. You can already express this in the NPC state, so to speak.
Yeah, but we
But
go
it's
back to the
just
same
it's
problem,
it's
right? Because
contained. It's not life. First you learn to love an apple, then you learn to love the meal, then you learn to love the hotel, then you learn to love the village, and after a while you're at the point of life. So the one who loves, who understands, who for the first time recognizes something of himself in the apple, um, that is the same love as the love that Jesus has, but he's on a he doesn't grasp love as fully as Jesus yet, but it is the same thing. But he so, and that's not a worldly difference,
okay,
you
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
because it's also possible that Jesus loves an apple at a very, very high level,
yeah,
very high intensity, and that is in worldly terms, that's different than what he did, than what Jesus did, but it can still be the same.
Yeah, the
But
essence.
I'm
Then
more speaking about orientation of the person who can only love the apple, so to speak, and then it expands. Yeah.
okay, but then you're saying that the difference is not only worldly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Between that person
I am
and
trying to describe a difference that is not at all worldly,
exactly.
but I can only use worldly
Yeah, okay, but then my
examples.
question would be the following. Suppose you have, okay, so now you have, let's say, Jesus Christ, okay? And then you have a person that is not at the level of Jesus Christ, but does have the essence of love, for example. So Jesus Christ can love
Yeah.
all of humanity. This person, is simpler, so to speak, but they do have the essence of love, okay? So suppose you have those two people, and then suppose here you have an NPC.
Hmm.
What would be the difference in your view? Like, would you just call the person, for example, that does have the essence, but is not at the level of Jesus Christ, an NPC, or is there a difference for you, or not, or what? What do you think?
I would probably call them an NPC.
Why?
Um, because for the largest part,
Okay,
they are not capable of love, but for a
but
small part, they are.
then let me make it more harder for you. So, what do you call the person here that is not capable of that love, even in the essence? So it's not at the level of Jesus Christ either.
I will
It's not here,
also
but
call
doesn't have
them
the
an
essence.
I will also call them an NPC.
But okay, but then, there you go. So I don't get it. Are you contradicting
Um,
the? So what's the
no,
difference
yeah,
between those two?
this is a good question. What is the difference? Is that the two NPCs are at this. If Jesus is here, I would say like everything below Jesus until like the most primitive human is NPC. So if you are at 2% love, you're NPC. If you're at 0% love, you're NPC. If you're at 14% love, you're NPC. So in that way, NPC is not a good descriptive term. NPC just means with NPC, I try to describe the part of someone that is not alive in the realm of love yet. And that can be so you can be 1% NPC, you're 99% fully in love with the world, or you can be like 100% NPC or 80% NPC. And I'd call all of these NPC, but there is quite a difference, of course, between
Yeah, okay, but
those different NPCs.
I want to narrow down something here because it seems to me that because you're thinking that you're making a distinction of essence, right? So you're saying that the distinction is not only worldly, so it's not only in the manifest worldly things, which again, when I'm
Yeah.
saying here worldly, I don't mean bad or evil or anything like that. It's like, as we said before in the example, so you have Einstein, which is more manifested in the world, his genius, like big, and then you can have a child that is learning how to whatever play an instrument, and the essence is the same, but there's also a difference that is worldly. In that we agree, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you have the difference, and that's like worldly difference. But then you say that basically everything below the highest worldly, the best, how to say this, like
The purest love, the
the
most
purest
complete
essence
love.
manifested basically perfectly in the world. Anything before that, then you call NPCness, or a
Yeah.
degree
I
a
base.
degree of NPCness, basically, right? So
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Okay. So so what do you call then not manifesting that essence, or do you say that everybody is always in that spectrum, so to speak? But what about, because for me the definition of NPC is basically somebody who's not on that spectrum, who are actually not manifesting like the true essence of their
I don't
being, so
think
to speak.
I don't think it's possible to not be on that spectrum.
Right. But that's where the definition of evil for me is useful. Because it is like the self, it is the foolish attempt to put your egoic self above your true essence, which is
As long
impossible.
as it's as long as it's foolish,
It's always
it's
foolish
not
because
evil.
it is impossible. It is impossible. But
But it's possible. Evil exists, so it's possible to a certain degree. So when
I mean,
it's foolish or when you're failing, it's not evil
I mean,
until a very high level.
it
Then
is
evil
possible.
stops being.
Yeah, it is possible to attempt to do it, but it is delusional in a way, in the sense that it always shoots itself in the foot because it's just not the case. An example
Yeah,
that I give,
you're never gonna reach the true finish line. Yeah,
yeah, it's just not going to
with
happen.
evil.
A metaphor that I use for that is like it's like trying to pack your house, your whole house, on your living room. It's it's just not gonna happen. You're gonna destroy your house, and then you're gonna have a chrome thing that is on the size of your living room. Yeah, you can do that, but you won't have your house inside of your living room. It's impossible. So the attempt of putting the ego above the what you call the true self or something like that is akin to that. I believe it's just like it's actually impossible, but you can still try to do it. Like you can do it, but it does turn to evil. That's almost like another way
I'd
of
say that
defining what
evil has a smaller ego than the NPC or the ignorant person.
you think so.
Yeah,
What
because
way?
the evil is smarter. The evil is sees more, understands more.
But
That's
see, that's a
only
worldly
possible when
that
you can look through the illusion to a higher degree.
but that's a worldly difference because it's like yeah, okay, you can be very intelligent and be evil, yeah,
No,
but
I
then
don't mean IQ smart. I just mean
but that is
spiritually smart.
but if again it's like we have to come to terms with the definitions here because for me by definition evil is spiritual stupidity, like by definition it's like why would you why would somebody like choose to be evil unless it's just badness that you're perceiving as evil, but in that case you would be wrong. But assuming that that's not the case, like how does it make sense that somebody who would be spiritually developed would choose to be evil? It's kind of contradictory in the definitions in my sense, in the sense that maybe there's a way of using those words that, for example, for me that would make
Hmm.
sense in what I would call badness, in the sense that sometimes, like for example, just for a simple example, like Jesus Christ goes into the temple and he whips their asses out and calls them brood of vipers. You could say, oh, that's bad, in the sense that it's not nice, it's not, uh, you know,
Yeah,
but
but that's not
it's
what
not
I mean.
evil. Yeah, I'm not saying that you mean that, but like I'm saying that it would make sense to me if that's what you meant. But if that's not what you mean, then I'm missing something there.
What I mean is like how do you love? What when you can only love when you're like perceptive. When you walk on the street or you speaking with a person, you start seeing and recognizing things in them, but also in yourself. You observe yourself to a higher degree than before that. That's how you do love, or that's the ingredients at least you need. You need to be able to perceive that stuff, and the only way to truly enslave and hate and other people effectively is if you can see those things, if just those same things that you know about yourself, your weaknesses or your eccentricities, and you see them in others. This way of seeing, you can use that way of seeing expertly to craft an exploitation system to steal the energy basically from other people. But you can also use it to free yourself and free them. But the root of it, the root of being able to do one of these two things is the same. And I would call that root the spiritual intelligence, just the perceptiveness, the awareness of these things. And then you can make the choice what you do with these things. And evil works. You
I
can
see.
manipulate the world in such a way where you use that knowledge for that route, so to
Yeah,
speak.
I see what you mean, but the difference in my view is that I would still consider that worldly type of knowledge, in the sense that the way I see it in terms of definitions, because again, is that love does imply that type of attention, but it also implies a detachment of the particulars of whatever you see or how can you use it or not. In the sense that you still can see it, so you, but I wouldn't call it love if it doesn't have that element. You see, if it has the element of a
Yes.
ulterior motivation, then it's not love.
Yeah, I agree with you. You can only I speak about the particulars, but you can only see those particulars with a certain detachment in a way, you know. But I know that's just the way I speak.
Yeah,
I perceive but I perceive it more directly from those particulars, I guess. You know, the most direct way of experiencing it is that, hey, I can see new particulars about myself and others, and but I know that's only possible because behind it, the essence. But I also sense that, of course. But I guess the most direct way I look at it
yeah.
is, but yeah,
But then
but it's
how
not
would,
only that, obviously.
yeah, and how would then, because the way I see it is like evil creates like a parallel version of the true thing. So I don't think actually that, I mean, you can see it happening. How evil people, even when they're extremely intelligent, they always end up blatantly failing to respond to reality. It always comes with living in a delusion, right? And there are examples of this that is like they're
But evil
undeniable.
responds to the reality perfectly if they're sufficiently advanced. It responds,
In,
but it just
in
responds
what
with
way?
a perfectly crafted lie. They
Right, but
just,
what I mean is that
yeah.
that only has power over, and this is something that a lot of people don't like to look at this fact, but I think it's just a fact. It only has power over us to the extent that you are evil too. Like if people are not in that world of illusion, then it's completely powerless because it's just literally an illusion. So people will be compassionate towards them because they will be like, oh, this poor, poor guy. He could be a genius, but he's doing some bullshit, and nobody. It's like it would be completely asinine. So evil, in a way, at its core, is completely mediocre and boring and dumb. But I'm not saying this only in a like in a useful utilitarian way to insult people who are evil or anything like that. Like I think that is actually the case. Like you can see that. I mean, you can even see it in simple examples. For example, like let's take Hitler, Some people now think he was cool or whatever. But for a moment, let's assume, okay, that we agree that he felt for the evil forces. The
Yeah.
same thing that allowed him to do that mess would have allowed him to become like the most amazing hero that existed. And whatever self gratific thing that he was seeking to feel powerful or to feel that he retribution or all of those things would have been fulfilled way more if he would have used the worldly power that he accrued in order to not be evil, to
Don't
not
know.
express evil.
I don't know because his observations about Jews, about himself, about his capabilities or who he is, about the German people, about many things. He was obviously very perceptive, and I don't mean just in an IQ way or in an EQ way, not but true perception. He
Yeah.
understood things about
Right.
himself, about the Germans, about the Jews. He
But then he
there
twisted them,
was
right?
sorry.
But then he twisted them to
Yes,
construct a lie.
he twisted them, but he twisted them with a goal, with a specific goal of
Right.
enslavement
And
and that sort of stuff.
right.
But he would never have been able to do that to that degree if he didn't know what he was doing. If he couldn't see that stuff.
But
So
if he
evil
knew what he
and
was doing,
good
would
is
have he
made
done
of
it?
the same stuff.
What?
Evil and good is made of the same stuff,
That's where I
of the
disagree because
same awareness.
I would say that goodness and badness, like in the lower level, in the more worldly level, I say yes. It's basically the same. It's just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, but it's even also at the higher level.
But in its
It's
essence,
also
evil doesn't exist. That's why it's boring at the end of the day because it actually doesn't. It's non-substantial and it's always self. It negates itself in a way. Always.
it's true. It's true. That's true. From like the ultimate perspective, that's true. But I would say like our worldly level, there's good and bad.
Yeah.
Then a level above that, there's good and evil, or love and or service to others, service to self. And then from the ultimate perspective, yeah, sure. Then this good and evil distinction also doesn't exist anymore. But I do think the distinction still exists,
Yeah. Yeah. It
even
does.
above the worldly level, because there's many levels above our worldly level.
I think it only exists in the spiritual plane, but it manifests. It has an effect in the world. Like the way I see it is like goodness and the truth. You can see it as the light, and in a very simple way, is just that which is. That's all. That's the truth, and that's God. It's that which is, and evil is this weird thing that is like the attempt to block that light, so to speak, and to claim it for your own. So it's the attempt to separate yourself from it in such a way that you can claim the light for yourself, so to speak, and pretend that you're the one who
Yeah,
has it. So
and
even
and
in that
I
way, what you were saying has a really good, important aspect to it. That is like, in a way, evil is always parasitic. So it always does require the light, and it does require certain type of awareness, so it can do what it does. But in a way, it's also completely powerless in the sense that it doesn't actually even exist. Like it's whatever power that it has
yes, but we
is
don't know that
parasitic.
yet. That's what I I think, but we can't see that yet.
What do you mean?
You have good and bad in the lower worldly level, and we can kind of see that, right? That there's no real distinction. But then at the higher level, there is good and evil, and if you are at that level, if you are at the level of love, of the level of good and evil, then you can't truly see the unity with evil yet, or the
Well,
non-existence of evil, or that it's also in a way the same or one. But you can't truly see that yet because it's just as powerful. It's just as they know just as much about love, but they just invert it in a way that doesn't really exist. But at your level, you don't know that it doesn't. You cannot see that yet, unless you can see it. I don't know. I'm not telling you who you are, but um, let's say for people, for aliens or for beings, the humans, the human level, they don't even know about good and evil at the start. They don't really know what it is, that it is real, blah, blah, blah. Then after a while, they make a choice, good or evil. And then you go to the next level, the fourth level, the level of love. The aliens or the people at the level of love, the good people and the evil ones, they cannot see the illusion yet. They and then they learn the lessons of love. They go to fifth density lessons of wisdom. And even there, still, there is a good and evil polarity in a good and evil world. You learn the lessons of wisdom, and then it collapses into one. So the beings in the fourth and fifth density, where there's of love and wisdom, they they don't know yet that it collapses into one, or maybe they know because someone told them, right? Maybe there's also spiritual masters in their societies that try to help them, but they cannot truly see it yet.
right.
um, you can only truly see it when you're at that level beyond wisdom. Then it's apparent to you. And so if you think you are seeing it now, well, if you're right, it means you're very, very far advanced beyond the average human level. But since you also seem to square the NPCs into it as evil, I doubt that that's the case.